by a phrase. Lady had a class of small children one night, and 5 and 6 years old, and said, let's share a happy thought. One said, I'm going to Disney World. What's your happy thought? Grandma's coming. What's your happy thought? I'm going to have a birthday. Came this little 6-year-old boy, said, what's your happy thought? He said, I believe I'm pregnant. Well, she didn't know what to do with that one, so after his class was over, she pulled him off the side. She said, okay, well, why was that such a happy thought? She said, oh, teacher, that was easy. This morning at breakfast, my mother told my daddy, I believe I'm pregnant. He said, that's a happy thought. Yeah. You have to think about that one for a little while. 3 elderly ladies got on a bus, all 3 of them hard of hearing. One says, sure is windy outside, isn't it? The other says, no, I believe today's Thursday. The other says, well, I'm thirsty too, let's get off. Now, here again, failings into communication. Have you left church some Sunday morning? And your husband says, honey, let's go home to eat. Let's go out to eat. You say, yes. He said, where do you want to go? You say, any place. He picked Chinese food, the very place you didn't want to go. You didn't like your food, didn't like your fortune cookie, and he realized something was wrong. So, what's wrong? You want to go here? Well, you said any place. Yes, but not here. We suggest you do a 1 to 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst, and give it a number. If we're going to go out to eat, I'll say, Lindy, what about Taco Bell?
Oh, that's about a 3, 4.
Okay, well, what about McDonald's?
Well, I'm not sure we're moving in the right direction, but...
Okay, well, what about Applebee's?
Oh, that's 7 or 8. That's a good thing.
Yeah, well, you can do it, 1 to 10 on whether or not, where you're going to eat or where you're going to have your mother-in-law over for a meal. You could do 1 to 10 on that one. All right, building on what we taught you last night. Okay, I'm going to assume everybody has their notes. You turn to, please listen to me. If you don't have a set of notes, you're not going to be able to understand what's going to happen. No. If you don't have a set of notes, you raise your hand. I'll see that you get one.
Right.
Has everybody got it covered?
Okay, we have 1 over here,
got
one back there, okay. 2 back there.
All right.
Let's see,
is responsible
we need help.
For handing out outlines, can somebody help
Maybe
me with that?
Help a little bit.
Yeah.
Just keep your hand up. Yeah. That'd be okay.
Those of you who have got your hands up agreed to give $5,000 to the building program.
No, you haven't. I think there was some lady over
somebody
here.
Somebody help me out.
Here's a lady right here.
All right.
A lady over here. Right. Go ahead.
Yep.
There's a gentleman down here.
Up. Yes, sirree. We're going to keep going. We'll get all the hands up here.
There we go. Anybody over here?
Yeah. Now you got to fill in the blanks because the test is Saturday. You got that?
No, we cover an awful lot of material in a short amount of time.
See, the thing is about the outlines, you can go home after.
This lady here.
Hey, this lady.
This lady right here.
Okay.
Right.
We don't have any more outlines? Well, you have to get here early to get an outline.
Well, wait a minute. Okay, here we go. A couple more.
I don't believe we have any more outlines.
We have any more?
No. Well, just got to get here early and be fast, I guess. Okay,
okay,
what we want you to do is take these outlines home with you, and then in the next several days after the conference and weeks, you can sit down and discuss these things. Well, here's what I learned. Well, I thought this was good, or whatever it might be. So that's the reason why we have gone to the trouble of providing for you these outlines. Now, building on what we taught you yesterday, number 1, foundation for good communication is the servant heart. If you have 2 selfish, self-centered people, you're going to have problems in any kind of relationship. You see, when you're dealing with your differences, if one person wins, the couple loses.
That's crucial.
That's crucial. One person wins, the couple loses. Secondly, we taught you the godly approach yesterday. You love unconditionally, forgive completely. Without this, you're not going to have good communication. And the final building stone is emotional intimacy. We're not talking about physical intimacy. We defined emotional intimacy for you as the freedom from anxiety in the presence of vulnerability. All right, those are the 3 very important building stones for good communication. Now, what are the barriers? What keeps us from communicating?
Well, this is really a bad news, good news night. Because if you can stand the bad news, I promise you we will end with good news. The number 1 barrier to good communication across the board, I don't care if you're talking husband, wife, parent, child, relative, friend, acquaintance, cohort at work, whatever it would be, the number 1 barrier to good communication is that we see the world differently. The psychobabble term perceptual differences, my definition, our own mental glasses. Some people call it a mental filter. Ladies and gentlemen, no human being has the capacity, the ability to see the world as it truly exists. Now, that doesn't mean we have no idea or baseline of reality. Oh, we do. But every one of us will look through the events that are going on in the world around us. I don't care whether it's sports, the weather, politics, the behavior of other people, our own behavior through our own mental glasses. The phrase that we truly hope you will be sick of by the time we leave tonight, and that we hope more than that, you will never forget, is not right, not wrong, just different. Everybody got that? Not right, not wrong, just different. What we're about tonight, largely, we're going to have a lot of fun, but we're going to cover the heart, core, and soul scientifically about why it is absolutely impossible for two people to see the world the same way. Why? Because hardwired into us the very moment of conception is difference, and within that difference lies the potential for conflict. Now, if you are like Jerry or like me or anyone else that we've ever worked with or known about, there is a little small voice in you, and sometimes it's not so little and sometimes not so small, and it says, or at least thinks, if you don't see the world exactly the way I do, there's something wrong with you. Okay, now, I want us just to pause a minute, and I want us just to look around. Everybody kind of look around. Do you see anyone that looks just like you? I don't think we have identical twins. We did a few weeks ago. Okay, no. Okay, that being the case, when you came into the building tonight, the first person that you saw, did you look at them with disgust and think or say, what's wrong with you? You don't look like me. Well, it's ludicrous, isn't it? Well, of course not. We don't expect that. Then why is it we look at each other and we think and often say, what's wrong with you? You don't see the world the way I do. All right, let's unpack that. That being said, what would be some of the things that would determine how each one of us is viewing the world around us, others, ourselves, everything, through our own mental filter glasses? What determines these filters?
Number one would be chronological age. Or whatever age you are is going to have a lot to do with how you perceive the world. A 2-day-old child does not see the world the same way as a 12-year-old. 12-year-old does not see the same way as a 24-year-old. So at whatever age you are is going to have a lot to do with how you see the world. Secondly, in this area, big is what we call life experiences. Every moment that we live, we experience something, we see something, we hear something, we read something. And all these factors then filter in or in our minds and create the filter by which we're going to see the world. Identical twins, they might like the same things on the hamburgers, wear the same kind of clothes, but they haven't had the same experiences. Huge in this area is the family of origin. We wish we could get our young couples anticipating marriage to look at this. These are what we call voices from the past, not audible voices, but those voices that reared us. In other words, those experiences we had in our family of origin. Those then become the glasses through which we're going to basically see the world. For instance, if you grew up in a home where you opened Christmas gifts on Christmas Eve, or that's when you want to do it. If you maybe grew up Christmas morning. Other things, did you squeeze the toothpaste from the middle, the top, or the bottom? That's important sometimes. Parenting styles, money management. Does the toilet paper roll over and under? And does anybody but a female be able to change that? In other words, these things create then the lens through which we're going to see the world.
We have a few more outlines. Okay. If you need an outline for tonight, I think there's a lady over here, probably, right? And go ahead and raise your hand again. Okay, there's one back there too. Okay. Thank you for your help. There's a gentleman behind you too.
Okay.
Okay. You're going to just point while I talk?
You want to point?
Yeah,
okay.
we just point.
You want me to point?
You point.
I'll point. You talk.
Okay, I'll talk. What are we doing? Oh, okay. Keep in mind, the human personality is built in the shape of a pyramid. If you remember that from yesterday, the base of the pyramid, what did we call it? What do we call it? The accident of birth, remember? Because those blocks that form the base of who we are represent the early voices that rear us. That's what Jerry's just talking about, early life experiences, the shoulds, the oughts, the have-tos, the musts, the way the world should work. The other blocks are what? The genetics that are pre-wired into us. And this forms the base of who we are, that nature-nurture argument. Now, that's what we're working with tonight, at least at this particular juncture. Let's talk about the genetics. Now, I'm not talking about hair, eye, skin color. That's a given. That's going to come through genetics. But ladies and gentlemen, there is a large amount of personality that scientifically now has been proven to come through genetic predisposition as well. In the 1970s, there was a very young psychiatrist by the name of Robert Cloninger. Now keep in mind, the psychiatrist is the MD that works with the brain, all right? And this psychiatrist joined hands with a very unique, everybody get an outline over here? Good. A very unique research pool in Sweden. Now let me tell you why this research pool was rather odd, I guess, but definitely unique. It was quite old at this point, been going on for a long time, and at the core of each subject, so to speak, was a child, an infant, that had been adopted out at birth, never ever to interact with the biological parents, at least not until they were adults. In other words, biology had absolutely nothing to do with the environment. Now, the thing that wasn't unique, but what was, the researchers had been able to maintain contact not only with the two biological parents until their death, but also the two adoptive parents. And so you see, you have a very pure subject of sort. You have pure genetics on one side, you have pure environment on the other. Okay, and then this child, and that they were researching something else at that point. But Cloninger went in, and by the way, let me spell that last name. Those of you that like this, you can look him up tonight and Google him and just read all night long. Okay, it's Robert like it sounds, and then Cloninger with a K, K-L-O-N-I-N-G-E-R, Robert Cloninger. Okay, well, at that point in time, in the 1970s, 60s as well, there was a very hot debate going on in religious circles, psychological circles, medical circles, whether or not alcoholism was genetic or environmental. Was there a genetic link to that, or was it totally a choice? And people could get really upset about all this. All right, well, Cloninger went in, obviously with permission, joined hands with this team and this huge research pool, tweak the design, and you never say causality in science, you can say correlation. And after a period of time, it was decided that there was a very distinct correlation between genetics and the tendency toward alcoholism. Now, I'm not deterministic. That does not mean that choice does enter into what we become, correct? Yeah, and so I'm not saying that a person would have to be an alcoholic, but if they had genetic predisposition for that, but there would be a higher tendency. You had some of these young adults that had no alcohol at all in their young environment when they grew up, yet one or both, they became alcoholics, and one or both parents were alcoholics of the biology, not the environment, and you had the converse of that was also true. And those of you that grew up in the 70s, 80s, certainly 90s and beyond that, you may recall your caregivers told you about the time you approached puberty, probably hopefully before. They may have warned you now, your friends are going to be experimenting with alcohol, we know that, but you must be very, very careful because what? Alcoholism what? Runs in our family. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm really trying to establish, and we're going to really kind of develop this point, like I said yesterday, we're all playing this game called life, but we're playing it with different cards. We're not homogeneous eyeballs. What might be a difficulty for you genetically, you might be genetically prone for one thing, might not be for me, and certainly vice versa with that. Now keep in mind, Cloninger is a psychiatrist, so you know where it's going to head with this stuff, right? He's wondering, okay, you've got alcoholism. What about personality traits? For many, many centuries, it was assumed a child was a blank slate. The child came into the world and the parents made the child whatever they wanted it to be. Do you remember what I told you yesterday? Most of us take way too much blame and way too much credit for the way our children turn out. Don't forget that, because it's true. It's true. Cloninger wanted to know, what about personality tendencies? Now, some researchers had done some research in this in other areas. Thomas and Chess had done a little bit of stuff, but the research pool was very limited. They had kind of looked at shyness. They called it slow to warm up. Some children were more sociable. They called it sociability than other children, but it was very limited, very closed. But now Cloninger had access to this huge pool of people. And so he went in, again, tweaked the design some more, and developed new instruments. That's what they used to kind of evaluate all the data. And again, you're not going to say causality, but certainly correlation. It was established that there was a very distinct biological link to two giant categories of personality: domains of character, or dimensions of character, domains of temperament, dimensions of character. I'll get it right in a minute. Domains of character, dimensions of, what is it? Domains of temperament, dimensions of character. Yeah, we got it. Okay, but there are 7 subcategories in those 2 huge categories. Now, keep in mind, I'm visual, all right? So we're working with my yardstick again tonight, okay? Now, you will see, and we tried to be pretty definitive in our adjectives as we go through these 7 areas. We're going to hit them pretty rapidly. First of all, we've been pretty definitive with these words, so you don't have to just scribble all the time. You can kind of listen and write a little bit slowly, hopefully. But a word to the wise, I warn you. Keep in mind, Cloninger is a scientist. Now, there is an element of spirituality to him, all right? Religion, certainly. But when you read these adjectives, if you are like me, immediately, like if I see pessimistic, I'm saying, oh, that's a no-no, that's a bad thing, I can't be that. Okay, don't do that, because don't attribute your definition to these adjectives to what Cloninger is meaning, because there's a very high probability he is not meaning what we might think. He is looking at this in a totally scientific kind of way. He was not trying to decide what was better or worse. You keep in mind, did you hear that? He's not saying this characteristic is better than this characteristic. And again, you're going to have a hard time if you're like me, because some of them seem so obvious. No, because you don't know what else is sleeping within that child, correct? Children do not come into the world with these 7 categories, and as well as the tendency toward alcoholism or whatever it would be, and say, this is what I am, this is how you parent me. No. So if you think one is better than the other, you're going to draw a wrong conclusion in just a few moments. And by the way, I will say this, anyone that is extreme in any of these 7 categories on either end of the continuum, they're far down here or far down here, they will have issues with relationships.
Now that's very important. If you're extreme in either way,
right,
it is going to produce problems in any kind of relationship, not just in a marriage relationship.
Right. Now I didn't say they weren't good people. I didn't say they weren't going to heaven. No one died and made me boss of anybody. I'm just telling you the scientific fact. Because of these tendencies, they will have difficulties in some way with their relationships. And don't try to buttonhole people at one end or the other. Most of us are kind of somewhere in the middle here. Some of us kind of lean one way or the other. Okay, but just be careful and keep in mind we're all playing this game called life, but what? We're playing it with different cards.
Okay.
All right, the first one, domains of temperament, you see on your outline. These things, these four will affect the way we make our choices. The first one you see on there is harm avoidance. Harm avoidance. Now, there you see those adjectives, anxious, pessimistic, outgoing, optimistic, and immediately you may want to think, well, like I indicated, I don't want a pessimistic, anxious kid, you know. I want one that's outgoing, optimistic, and all of that. Okay, just wait a minute. I told you I was going to prove you wrong. Let's say you have 3 children. One of them has the genetic propensity for alcoholism, the other 2 do not, which is quite possible. It happens all the time. It does. And you don't know what's what. You don't know what that is. If you could choose, as if you could choose for that one child that has the genetic predisposition for alcoholism, whether they would be more anxious or pessimistic or outgoing optimistic, which one would you want? You'd probably want the one that was pessimistic, right? Because they are going to be more hesitant as far as stretching and trying, stuff like that. The more optimistic kid, this isn't going to affect me, I'm fine, I can do this. Do you understand what I'm talking about here? So you can't say one's better than another. We can't do that because we don't know what other characteristics are there. The second one is a lot of fun. It's novelty seeking, novelty seeking. Some of you watch the extreme winter sports and the Winter Olympics and you think, oh, just give me half a chance. Others of you more like me, no, I just like my chair and my hot chocolate, thank you very much, I'll watch. These individuals have that are high on the impulsive, and we keep in mind, quick tempering doesn't mean they vent all the time, all right? Just be careful there. But if you have a more impulsive person, these are individuals that have a very low threshold of stimulation. In other words, been there, done that, I've done that, I don't want to do it again. Other people, they're not right, they're not wrong, they just warm more slowly. They're not novelty seeking at all. Okay, let's say you have 2 children, you take them snow skiing over spring break. One of them, and again, they're not going to announce it to you, is more rigid, the other is more impulsive. The rigid child will probably stay in ski school all week and be just really happy on the bunny slopes, just really doing fine. As far as the impulsive kid, 30 minutes in ski school and we're ready for the black slope. You see? Now, what is going to happen? Let me show you how this kind of gets convoluted. What happens if you have 2 parents that are impulsive, which is possible, and a rigid child? Keep in mind, the moment of conception, it's not just you and the spouse, it's everyone in the genetic pools of those 2 people. And sometimes these genes mix and match in unusual ways. All right? If the parents aren't privy to this information or astute or pay attention, they're impulsive, they have this rigid kid, the child won't be very old at all before they get the message either verbalized or just with the general feeling. Things like, what's wrong with you? You're afraid of your shadow. Go out and ride your bicycle. Oh my goodness, what's the deal? Get out on the drive. Go play with your friends down the street. What's wrong with you? Why are you so afraid of things? Ladies and gentlemen, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that child. It's everything that's wrong with the parents. Why? Because the parents erroneously assumed because we are this way, this is the right way to be, and if the child is not this way, they are wrong. Remember the phrase, not right, not wrong? What? Different.
Next, let's talk about reward dependent. Here again, the 2 extremes we have. On one end, you have the warm, seeking approval individual. In other words, this individual is not going to go against the grain. He's concerned about what other opinions are, and he's just not going to fight anything. He's just going to go along. The other one on the other end is cold and aloof. Now, we're not saying this person is not concerned about the feelings of others, but they can make decisions themselves. For instance, if you were owned a company and you wanted to employ a president or a top CEO, which way would you want to go? You would want to go the cold and aloof because they can make the tough decisions. This warm and approving can't make some of the tough decisions they ought to make. I've seen this happen in churches. I've seen churches appoint elders, And this man is a good, fine Christian man, knows his Bible and everything else, but he's warm and approving. In other words, he can't really be the kind of leader that he ought to be. Again, you'll see it in children. We have 3 grandchildren live in Little Rock, and 2 of them, the 2 oldest ones, are really perfectly illustrates what we're talking about. Asher, the oldest one, if you look at him and say, Asher, what you did, upsets Pawpaw, he just sort of looks at you. Like, what's your point?
Just like his father.
Yeah. Graham, his younger brother, you look at him sideways and he'd almost start crying. So here again, you see the difference there. Next is the area of persistence. Here, this one person on one extreme, go for the broke, go for the goal. They fall down, they get up, and they try again. The other extreme, these people already see themselves as failures, and so if something doesn't go right the first time, they quit and try to do something else. That's why when you're working with children, in doing homework, some are going to need more encouragement than others are going to need. And so here again, you cannot parent the same way with every child, because every child does not come into this world with the same genetic predisposition.
Okay, now let's get to the dimensions of character. These 3 categories will affect what choices we make. Not the way we make them, but what choices we make. The first is cooperativeness. Some people play well with others. They're very good in think tanks. They're wonderful on committees. They're really good when they're just interacting with other people, team players, so to speak. Other people, not so much. They're not right, they're not wrong, but they're much better off if you give them their job, let them do their thing, kind of leave them alone. Okay, not right, not wrong, just the way it is. The next, as we go along, is self-directedness. Now, this is not necessarily the same thing as persistence. Persistent people will continue to try. Now, that may be a positive, that may be a negative, depending on what they are persistent about, correct? Absolutely. Same thing with self-directedness. These people may or may not be persistent. It just depends. Self-directed means that they know where they want to go and they have a plan to get there, and they will, if this plan doesn't work, then maybe they might try another plan. However, if they are not persistent, that means they may half try or try once and then they're just all over the map trying to go everywhere instead of, do you see what this is? Again, it's not right, it's not wrong. It's just the way it is. The final one, the self-transcendence, is the one that makes us stutter step just a little bit, especially in this particular environment, communities of faith, simply because we say spiritual and automatically, usually our minds would go to God, to spiritual things, but that's really not exactly what Cloninger was referencing. He was referencing individuals that are far end of that self-forgetful spiritual side. These are individuals that think they're a little bit more intuitive, a little bit wiser, a little bit smarter, have the ability to think globally better than other people, and they know what's best for other people. Now, I'm not saying that's positive, I'm not saying that's negative, but what I will say, if you have an individual that is extreme at that end of the continuum of the spirituality, and they feel they're more intuitive, wiser, all of that, they're right, you couple that with an individual that is not cooperative, and they are not reward dependent, and you end up with nitroglycerin in a wagon. In a family, in a community, in a church, and wherever, I don't care what environment, in the world, I don't care where you're talking about. Why? Because they think they're smarter than anyone else anyway. They don't care what anyone else thinks, right? And they're not about to play well with others. They're going to do it their way. And so you can see how that can be very dicey. Now, before we move on here, I want to just back up. You have seen the tip of the iceberg of this. Now keep in mind, you choose your friends, right? You choose your spouse. Ladies and gentlemen, you do not choose your biological relatives. And that includes your children. And you do not choose the biological relatives of your spouse.
See, that's why family reunions and things like that can be so stressful.
They really can
Because
be.
you have to spend time with some people that normally you wouldn't select as friends.
No, you wouldn't.
No. Now, and see, some people be concerned that they have some people closer to them in friendship that are not blood related. This is what we're talking about.
It's normal. In fact, I can honestly tell you, and again, we've been around the block so many times, we've seen it, that it is really impossible for some people to rear their own biological children. For some people, effectively. It's impossible for them to, just because the personalities are oil and water. And usually the fat hits the fire during the teen years. You know, there are two parents for more than one reason. When that happens, it is the astute parent that says, okay, this isn't working, I'm going to step back. And they let the other people, the other parent, kind of step forward and take it for a bit. It is the domineering, more stubborn parent that just keeps bearing down, bearing down, bearing down. And usually what that does is just create more of a rift with the child than actually helping to soothe it over. Okay, a complex thing. Tip of the iceberg, look it up online. Those of you that like it, you'll like it.
Final factor that has a lot to do with how you see the world would be physical health. If you're dealing with a physical problem, we're talking about illness, disease, anxiety, backaches, migraine headaches, even depression. Now, we mentioned depression here, and we're going to revisit it on Wednesday night because people are so confused about it. It actually comes from 4 different sources, and we'll explain that in detail. If you are dealing with some kind of physical problem, you cannot expect yourself to see the world the same way as a person who doesn't deal with that. Next, in dealing with communication, we'll talk about perceptions or paradigms and schematas. Schematas are mental maps that guide thought and behavior. We have hundreds and thousands of these, and I'll revisit this in just a few minutes. But let me talk to you about a paradigm. A paradigm is how you see the world, how you think things ought to be. Listen carefully. The longer you have lived believing a certain thing should be a certain way, and the more you've invested in it, the harder it is to change even when outside information contradicts it. The longer you have lived believing a certain thing should be a certain way, and the more you've invested in it, the harder it is to change even though outside information contradicts it. When outside information contradicts what you believe, it creates what's called cognitive dissonance. And you'll have one of two choices. Either change your mind or get rid of the evidence. It's the only choices that you have. You see, in many ways, this is the basis of a lot of your cults today. Jim Jones, David Koresh type stuff. You see, people went into that. They gave up their freedoms. They gave up their friends. They gave up their money. They gave up everything. And then when they got in there and saw all the bad things happening, for them to admit that they had made a mistake was just too difficult for them to be. That's why we talk about older people are set in their ways. Why? Because if they have lived 50, 60, 70 years believing a certain thing should be a certain way, then it ought to be that. If Lynn has lived 70 years believing this color is...
Does that mean I'm an older people? Okay, yeah, this color's red. It's a lovely red.
She believes this is red, okay? I can show her all the evidence, everything, all the color prisms, everything, but if she's lived 70 years believing that it's red, as far as she's concerned, it is red. Man goes to the doctor said, what's your problem? He said, I'm dead. He said, well, how long have you been dead? He said, several years. He said, do dead men bleed? He said, of course not. Doctor said, stick out your finger. Stuck his finger out, cut his finger, blood started coming out. Doctor said, what do you think about that? He said, what do you know? Dead men do bleed. In other words, he didn't know what to do then basically with the evidence. So a paradigm, I've described it for you. Now, substructures under a paradigm are these schematas or mental maps that guide thought and behavior. And again, I tell you, we have hundreds and thousands of these. If I mention the word or the phrase living room, you have a picture of a living room. This may be where you live. Dog sleeps on the couch. You might even have a meal in there, disciplines your children. It's the hub of the family. I know enough about Arkansas to know that some of you don't think that is the living room. The living room is that room off to the side that nobody's allowed to go into it except company. You fluff it and puff it once a week and keep it so clean you can do open heart surgery on the floor. Now, that doesn't mean right or wrong. Vacation. You have an idea of a vacation. In other words, again, these are mental maps that guide thought and behavior. Now, what we have done tonight is we brought along a couple friends of ours. We call them Albert and Betty. You might not think they look like Lynn and Jerry, but they will look like us before the evening is over. Let me tell you about Albert and Betty. Albert and Betty have been married about a year. They took premarital counseling, which was a wise thing to do. And the counselor told them at the end of the first session, you're going to have problems in communication. Well, they didn't think that was, going to be a problem because they said we talk all the time. They had equated conversation with communication. Not necessarily so. Okay. They both work outside the home, same number of hours. And they decided then that on 7:30 on Saturday morning, they would get up and clean the house. Here is Betty's concept of clean house, travels over time and space, and it activates Albert's clean house.
All right, it is 7:30 on a Saturday morning, and the alarm goes off, and in Betty's mind, she knows what clean house means. And she does. She shakes Albert into wakefulness and says, Albert, it's time now to get up and clean the house. Same words. Travel over time and space. Same language. Activate. Those are little red dots. Just pretend. I don't know that you can see those, but they're little red dots in his brain. Surely it has the same meaning, right? Well, maybe not. Jerry, would you tell us what Albert thinks about when he thinks about a clean house?
If there's a path you can get through. All the dirty dishes in the sink are green and nothing green growing in them. Waste paper cans are full but not overflowing. Bedclothes are on top of the bed and towels are over some kind of a rack and all dirty clothes within 4 feet of the hamper. That is clean house.
That's not what Betty thinks about when she thinks about clean house.
No.
She's not right, nor is she wrong, but she is totally different. When she thinks about clean house, she wants it clean. She wants it dusted. She wants it vacuumed. She wants the bathroom sterilized. She wants the kitchen floor scrubbed. She wants the laundry done or being done. Trash cans emptied. Same with dishes are done or being done. In other words, she wants the house clean.
You come to my house and stand still more than 15 seconds, there are several options could take place.
Do tell.
You could be dusted, painted, put in your place, or thrown in the trash can. It's so bad I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning, get a drink of water, and came back and found the bed made. Folks, that's what we're dealing with.
I used to try to rebuttal, but I don't anymore. Anyone want to guess what we're going to argue about?
We'll do that later.
Just stick around.
All right, it is noontime. We have cleaned the house, and Albert's been reading all these books that couples need to spend time together. And he's never said that before, but he says time together. It goes over to travels time and space. Activates her time together. And so she's so excited. She said, well, Albert, what are we going to do on this time together? He said, it's noontime. And the Arkansas Razorbacks are playing the Texas Longhorns in football. You go get in your chair, I'll get in my chair, and the game will begin. That's very important. When the game starts, you not say anything, because I'll liable to miss a play. Now, there's no hook 'em horns in this house, okay? It's suey pig, that's all it is to it. Now, at halftime, you can say what you want to say. Second half start, you get back in your chair, get in my chair, and of course, when the game is over, the Hogs will probably beat the Texas Longhorns, probably 59-0. And Albert looks at Betty and said, have we spent a wonderful Saturday afternoon together?
Albert, have you and Betty said anything of substance during that time?
We have been in the same room for 3 hours within 6 feet of one another. That's togetherness.
That's not what Betty thinks about when she thinks about time together. She's not right, nor is she wrong, but she's different. When she thinks about time together, she wants in his face, and I don't mean in a negative way. She wants him to listen to her with his eyes. She doesn't want him working on the computer, watching television, writing a letter. She doesn't want him talking on the phone. She wants his undivided attention with eye contact.
Gentlemen, if your wife wants to go shopping with her, this could be the reason.
Maybe.
You know, I mean, it's not that she needs help in selecting things, but you're going in and out of stores. You're spending wonderful time together as she defines time together. Next, let's talk about ego defenses. A child, when they're born in this world, do not know where they end and something else begins. Did you ever see a child in the crib mystified by their own hand? You know why? They don't know that's their hand. Did you ever see a child take its foot, stick it in the mouth, bite the foot, then begin to cry? And you announce to your spouse, we have one that's not too bright. Child does not know that's not my foot. Now, between the 12th and 24th month, the child begins to learn some things. I'm not the floor, I'm not the wall, surely not you, to listen to me. All right, mothers, we call this the terrible twos. Good time in the life of the child, tough time in the life of the parent. Now, this ego, or I am, is the most frail part of the personality. If you were a child, and you could probably think about some of these times, and my opinion was important to you, and I came up and said you were dumb, you're stupid, what are you using for brains? Then I broke your arm. What would you remember 10, 20, 30, 40 years later? Probably the words. I would suggest there's not a parent, there's not an adult in this audience tonight cannot think of something that was said to you when you were small. And here you are, a very responsible individual. Because it's the more frail part of the personality, it comes into existence with the whole arsenal of defenses.
Now, that's an odd word, arsenal. But we can find no other term that describes as accurately where the ego defenses are located and what they do. Now think about it. An arsenal is usually covered, right? Always. It's covered, sometimes hidden. It's never just out in the open. It's protected. And it serves one purpose, and that is destroy whatever is perceived as threatening. Correct? It is used to destroy what is threatening, and it is covered. The ego defenses work that way with the mind. They operate right at or below conscious level. We don't know they're there unless we start looking for them, thinking about them, and then we can find them. They're there, and they serve one purpose, and that is destroy whatever we feel is threatening our safety and security mentally. Now, let's review just a little bit. Do you remember yesterday we were talking, those of you that were with us, do you remember we were talking about that human being is hardwired to survive physically? All right? And if you meet a woolly mammoth thousands of years ago, you don't have a committee meeting with all your body parts deciding what everything wants to do. No, it's going to be fight or flee or faint, okay? But fight or flee. In other words, it's automatic because if you take time to think about it, you die. Species dies. It's hardwired into us. It's hardwired into all the animal kingdom. It is survival of the species. It's the way we are created. We thrive on safety. That's what's going on. The human being is hardwired to survive, and I will take what actions are necessary to be safe so I can sustain life. The mind is the same way with safety. We thrive on balance. We thrive on security. We thrive on predictability. We thrive on safety. If something in my life makes me feel unsafe in my mind, abandonment, rejection, failure, isolation, boredom, stress, anxiety, you could go on and on and on. The world is life is full of expectations and of experiences and emotions that make us feel unsafe, correct? If the individual does not have tools to know how to work with those things, then this arsenal of ego defenses kicks in. And to protect the mind, they help the mind create a world where they feel safe. They actually help the mind create a new reality. It may be false, but it's real to them. Now, I know that sounds very convoluted and probably a C- definition, but ladies and gentlemen, people will do what they have to do to survive unless they have a higher order thinking that will trump that and will acknowledge the rights of other people, because this is base animalism right here. Survival, safety. And the mind is just like the body. It will do whatever it has to do to create a world where I don't feel unsafe, I don't have to hurt mentally. Now, remember the statement, anything good can be bad, anything God makes good, Satan can make bad? This is the same thing.
All right, first of all, they can be helpful if they allow the time then to adjust to life events. You go see a person who's maybe lost a loved one by a heart attack or a car wreck of some kind. You see the shroud of denial over them. For them to accept the new normal would be very, very difficult. You go back and see them 6 months later and things are very different. So they can be helpful temporarily, but they can also be destructive. Be destructive in the sense they keep us from acknowledging a sin or interfere with our relationships. In other words, we think everybody else is messed up, and we don't see then our own shortcomings. So they can be helpful, they can be destructive. Now, we're going to run through some of the major ones pretty quickly, and we're going to show you these. And now, when they come up on the screen, if you're sitting close to somebody you think uses one of those, you're going to be tempted to punch them and say, "That's you, right there." Okay, we're not allowing that tonight, as far as I'm concerned. It's not about Lynn, it's about me. As far as Lynn's concerned, it's about her and not me. So just keep in mind, we all use these from time to time, and let's just see how they work. The first one is the idea of denial. Denial is to admit there's not, to refuse to admit there's a problem or accept responsibility for one's attitude or actions. If Lynn comes to me and says there's a problem in the marriage, I don't want to talk about it because it involves me. And I'll say, "Yeah, I'm not the problem, you're the problem." That might be true. But what's the first step in any 12-step programs? You know 12-step programs? First step is you admit, you take responsibility. I'm an alcoholic, I'm a drug addict, or whatever it might be. So denial is one of the major then ego defenses.
And by the way, let me pause right here. There are more ego defenses. These are just the ones that usually interfere with relationships more than the others. And by the way, denial's job is to make sure we don't admit we have any of the others. Yeah. Because if we admit we have any of these, it makes us feel unsafe, correct? And so it's really easy to go in denial. Now, if you're sitting there and thinking after we finish, I don't have any of those, you're in major denial. We need to talk to the people that love you, that live with you. Now, we all use some of them. We don't, I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. The idea is to figure out how to work with them, and we're going to address that a little later. Okay, the second one is withdrawal. You see the psychobabble definition? Removing oneself physically or mentally from the situation that's producing the anxiety or the discomfort. My definition, it's too hot in here. You're getting too close to me, and so I am leaving the building. Physically or mentally, I am out of here. I'm gone.
Have you ever been talking to somebody and it wasn't late at night and they went to sleep while you were trying to explain something? Or have you ever been talking to somebody and said, "We know if you shut your mouth, I'm going to go home to my mother"? This is the basis of your drug and alcohol abuse today, if you haven't put it together. A person cannot handle the problems, the challenges, the difficulties of life, so what do? They withdraw into a world created either by drugs or alcohol. Now, there is a legitimate use of withdrawal. Let's say Lynn comes to me and says there's a problem. Maybe I'm tired, maybe I'm preoccupied with some things, and I just really didn't want to talk about it. It's my job, gentlemen, to establish a time and a place within the next 24 hours to say we're going to deal with this, all right?
Would you repeat that, please?
You establish a time and a place within the next 24 hours.
How many hours?
24.
Okay.
I think I've said it twice now.
Yeah.
Third time is 24. In other words, I just can't say we'll talk about this some other time. We're going to talk about it tomorrow night here in the den at 7 o'clock. Occasionally, some people, when they realize that we help marriages and everything, and we've been married now nearly 25 years, some people have asked us, when they get to know us, do the two of you ever argue?
Well, you know the answer to that, right? Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know that we would say we argue. What do you call it?
I would rather describe it as moments of intense fellowship.
Yeah. We have lots of opportunities.
Let's move on to something else.
Intense fellowship. The next is displacement. This occurs when an individual perceives a less threatening person or object as the source of one's problems or definition, or problems or difficulties. My definition is someone lower than I am in my mind, in my hierarchy. Ironically, those are the people usually I say I love the most, that I live with, maybe I'm the closest to emotionally. People that can't get away from me. The people I am the closest to catch my heat. Almost always, displacement involves vented anger.
Man goes to work, has been working on a project a long time. Boss comes in and says, well, how are you doing on the project? And he shows to the boss. The boss says, this is unacceptable. Tear it up and start all over again. Is he angry? Yes. However, he displays his anger on his boss. He's liable to get fired. But he goes home and finds his wife cooking green beans rather than peas. So he displaces the anger on her by saying, why are you fixing green beans for? She doesn't know what happened at work. She's got the anger displaced on her. What is she going to do with it? According to her, the 16-year-old teenager is got the radio on entirely too loud. She goes in there, she don't shut the thing down, we're throwing it out in the backyard. 16-year-old teenager can't figure out what tree mom's falling out of. What is he going to do with the anger? His 6-year-old brother happened to be walking through the room. He tells him, you don't ever walk through my room like that ever again. It scares the 6-year-old. He runs to his room, shuts the door, picks up his teddy bear and says, I told you. If you don't get that smirk off your face, I'm going to smash your nose. The old kick the cat story. It's the basis of a lot of your spousal and child abuse in our world. We'll deal with anger, not anger management, how to cut the cancer out in the next hour.
So the rest of that story later. The next is the first cousin to displacement projection. This occurs when an individual attributes unacceptable attitudes or actions that he or she might be experiencing to other people. My definition, someone else has my problems. Someone else has my issues. Let's review. By the time we're 19, 20, 21, we define who we are, basically, correct? Our moral value system is in place. We know who we are. If we behave in a way that contradicts who we think we are, or even think in a way that contradicts who we think we are, it makes us feel unsafe inside, unsettled inside, insecure inside. It just feels off balance. That's the way it feels. It feels off balance. So when the big gun, literally a projection comes in, it says everyone else out of the way. I've got this one. We don't have that problem. Other people have that problem. It is so much easier for me to say, Jerry, you're being so selfish, than it is for me to do what? Lynn, look at yourself. Look how selfish you are being here.
It's easier for me to say, you're hard to get along with, and admit that I'm hard to get along with. Have you ever been talking to another individual about another person, and all of a sudden it dawns on you they're projecting on that person their own feelings and life? Man goes to the doctor. He said, doctor, my wife has a hearing problem, at least I think, and she won't get tested. How can I know she has a hearing problem? He said, well, it's simple. Just go home, and when she is not looking at you, say something and see if she will respond. He thought that was a good idea. So he goes home, slips in the back door, and there she is, back turned to him, does not hear him come in. She's at the stove cooking supper. So he says, what's for supper? She doesn't respond. He gets a little bit closer and says, I said, what's for supper? No response from her. He gets right behind her head, cups his hands and says, I said, what's for supper? She turns around, is about as mad as she can be. She said, I'm telling you for the third time, chicken.
Aren't these fun? The next to last is regression. It occurs when an individual reverts back to a behavior that was characteristic of a time that was more secure or satisfying. My definition, we act like children. That's all that says. That means that we don't know how to resolve issues, differences, conflict on the adult level. And so what do? We knee-jerk, we regress, we go back in time and act like we did when we felt threatened or hurt as children, hopefully before we learned any better. Now, when you have people that are really pouting, right? When you have people that are crying, not sincerely, but in a manipulative way, that's basically what you have going on. When you have adult people yelling at each other like we will do royally in a few minutes, people hitting each other, we were not going to do that. Fist through walls, road rage, throwing things. There's a very high probability you have 4-year-olds in adult bodies. And that's hard to say, but that's really the truth. You have adults that don't know how to disagree without feeling personally threatened, like they are in danger, in affront. And so what happens? The big gun literally of regression comes in, the wagons are circled, and the ego just knows, it just lashes out. That's what it is, instead of solving something, regression. The final and the king of all that we all use is rationalization. This is a good one. This occurs when an individual justifies the true motivations for one's thoughts, actions, or feelings through reassuring or self-serving but incorrect explanations. My definition of that, and again it's convoluted, my definition is we conveniently change the rules. Again, review, by the time we're 19, 20, 21, we define who we are, what we'll do. Our moral value system is in place. When it creates a feeling of settledness, when I project, I give you the problem, right? You're selfish, you. When I rationalize, it comes from the same place, right? But I don't give you the problem. I just conveniently change the rules. Well, I had to speed because if I didn't speed, I would have been late to work, and then I would have lost my job, and then I couldn't feed my children or pay my mortgage, so I had to speed. The problem is I'm always late, so I'm always speeding.
Okay. Latter part of the 70s, I was chairman of the Bible Department of Harding University, traveling all over the country, doing special lectures and so on. The United States government says we have an energy crunch, so on all major highways, 55 miles an hour is the maximum. I thought it was ridiculous. I thought we can't get any place, but I thought, well, I better abide by it. That Friday afternoon, I jumped in my car and drove from Searcy to Little Rock to Texarkana to Dallas, south then to Austin, Texas. Preached Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Jumped in my car Sunday night, drove back to Dallas, started east then, headed to Texarkana at 55 miles an hour. I thought, man, I'll never get home this way. This is ridiculous. What I didn't understand is the 18-wheelers were going right past me like I was sitting still. I said, how could they be doing 70 and 75 when the speed limit's 55? I'd put a CB in my car. This is before the days of cell phones. In case my old car broke down, I could maybe call somebody. So I turned that thing on and found out the truckers talked to one another on 19. And I began eavesdropping and I found out what was going on. Every trucker going either east or west would always tell the other truckers if they saw a highway patrolman or a radar unit where it was, so they could slow down and not get a ticket. In other words, they were helping one another. And I thought, what a nice Christian thing to do. Maybe they'd be interested in helping me. So I grabbed that microphone and said, breaker 19, you got the Arkansas Deer Slayer. We eastbound the super slab, the 2-6 marker looking for front door, bring her back. Pretty soon I heard a voice, you got tumbleweed, you got ratchet jaws up here, Arkansas Deer Slayer, put the pedal to the metal and bring it on. I said, we're coming your way. I jacked it up into about 70, 75. I said, I better get me a back door, breaker 19, you got the Arkansas Deer Slayer. We're looking for a back door where it's a 2-5 marker. I heard the voice say, you got tumbleweed back here, Arkansas Deer Slayer. We be your back door, ratchet jaws be your front door, and we gone. I said, we're gone. I said, man, I'm going to get home earlier, get to see my family, get a better night's sleep. Hey, this is just going to be great. Truckers get a little lonely about midnight. I heard my name called. So, breaker 19, Arkansas Deer Slayer. This is ratchet jaws. You got your ears on? I said, 10-4, kick her back. He said, Arkansas Deer Slayer, you be headed to the Rock City? I said, negatory. Arkansas Deer Slayer be headed to that Searcy Town north of that Rock City. Don't you know, bring her back. He said, Arkansas Deer Slayer, what be your occupation at Searcy Town? Arkansas Deer Slayer, you got a copy? Yeah, I got a copy, and I heard him, and I knew what I did. But there was something in me, and I just couldn't tell him, you got the chairman of the Bible Department of Harding University. We're traveling down this super slab at 75 miles an hour to get back and teach our Old Testament class on the 10 Commandments in the morning. I hung the thing up, ratchet jaws, to this day, never found out what happened to the Arkansas Deer Slayer. What had I done? I had rationalized breaking the law. We watch people rationalize lying, cheating, stealing, immorality, and all kinds of stuff. Quickly, how do you defend against the offenses? Number one, you admit that you have them. You had them since you're 2, you have them till you're 102. Secondly, identify them. Sometimes they come in pairs. They like one another so much. And finally, then you need to learn to work around them. That's our job this next hour. It's going to be a difficult one because we're going to spend about 40 minutes talking about anger, not anger management, but how to cut the cancer out, and then also how to then work with one another. Mr. Jack has got an announcement.
Yes, sir. I got a couple
so
quick
I'll turn it over to him.
announcements. First, when you get up to stretch your legs and stuff, we have some leftovers from yesterday in the fellowship room. This is not a fellowship event, however. Please go get what you need, what